brings me to the next session we have with three guests. Actually, we've lined up three, and I think only two are here at the moment, but I think we should crack on anyway. And we're going to be looking at the subject of communication in 2022. And I'd love to welcome up Paul Kerensa, who is a broadcaster and comic and author and writer for shows like Miranda, Top Gear, amongst others. And also Emma Borquaye, who is a speaker, author, and founder of the multi-award-winning online platform Girl Got Faith, and she pioneers new ways to engage teen girls with faith. It's so exciting to welcome these guys up. And if we have the third panelist as well, who's going to join us, I will introduce her when she comes. But in the meantime, let's start the conversation with Paul and Emma. Hello, guys. Are you there? Welcome.
Oh gosh, my background is crazy.
Can I tell you, I've been doing that for the last 15 minutes, trying to make my face not blue. So this is like, do you remember the Blue Man Group? Do you remember that Blue Man Group thing? That this is what we are nowadays.
Emma, is there a way you can just take it off? No problem.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try now. 1 sec.
Oh, fabulous. So while Emma does that, Paul, where are you tuning in from right now?
Greetings. Hello. I'm in, I was going to say sunny Guildford. It's sunny, but chilly Guildford. So in fact, a blue background would have been perfect. It is like an igloo here right now. So, but we couldn't quite get that. So here we are. Really
good to see you. And how are you getting on, Emma? Emma, is it working?
Sorry.
Yes,
right,
there you go. Oh, no, it's good to see. Where are you based, Emma?
So I am in Greenwich in Southeast London.
Fabulous. Well, look, it's really good to be able to spend a bit of time with you, and maybe Jemma can join us when she gets here. But really, really exciting. We're going to look at this subject of communication in 2022, and really the heart behind this is, just we live in, in a context and a culture where communication can be a little bit challenging, and yet we're called to present and to communicate good news in creative and engaging ways. And, I'd just love to use this space to really inspire and encourage people who may be called to step out in faith, maybe for the first time for some, and for others, maybe they've been doing this for a while. But, I thought having a conversation around this, maybe the landscape is changing slightly in 2022, given the context we come from the last couple of years. And as I've been speaking, Jemma has joined us as well. Let's bring Jemma up onto the stage. Really good to have you, Jemma. Jemma Regis. Jemma Regis is a Christian author, entrepreneur, and founder of God's Romantic Getaway Spiritual Intimacy Retreats. And it's great to see you, Jemma. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, he can hear you fine.
Excellent.
Can hear you fine. Really good to see you guys. Well, look, I'd love to kick off with just connecting with an audience. Let's go sort of big picture, just, things that you guys have found that work really well. You're connecting with audiences in different ways. You're connecting with different audiences. What sort of principles have you picked up in your work, in your experience, ways that you connect with your audiences? Emma, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, sure. So with Girl Got Faith, the work that I do there, our primary audience is teenage girls. So girls aged 11 to 18. So the kind of our core principle with connecting with our audience is to meet them where they're at. So that means for us being on social media, being present online. And that is where we get our message across. We don't often ask the girls to come away from the social media platform to engage with us elsewhere. We try not to insert too many links into everything that we do. We just want to make everything accessible in the moment, right where they're at, just scrolling through social media. So that's kind of our primary way of connecting with our audience.
Thanks, Emma. How about you, Paul? You're broadcasting and communicating in lots of different ways and in platforms. Tell us some principles that you may have picked up or how you're doing it.
Yeah, it is, as you said at the top, it's a changing time, isn't it? So it does mean that what I used to wear two different hats, let's say that. So I was a stand-up comedian and a writer and a little bit of broadcasting now and then. And then now it feels like 9 hats. So now I'm pivoting, put it that way. So the stand-up comedy circuit isn't, should we say, what it was just now, with a bit of reluctance to get out there. So there's more online stuff. I've tried the online comedy thing of Zoom gigs, and Facebook Lives, and they are every bit as hideous as you can imagine when you can't hear your audience. So, but it does, for me, reflect that change, that shift towards online, towards fostering those online communities, and towards how we can engage with people when we can't hear them and when we can't see them. But actually, that's sort of what we've been doing anyway for ages, whether it's to do with Twitter or social media or email lists and things like that. You are sending stuff out there, never quite knowing how it lands. And I'm doing a big project at the minute about the history of broadcasting, which is 100 years old this year. And back then, 100 years ago, they had this, they were sending stuff out there, and they were commenting at the time. They had no idea how it was being received by people. And we are experiencing that anew in this whole shift online, I think.
Thanks, Paul. How about you, Jemma, for your context?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Do you know what? I have to admit, I think I'm old school, so I struggle. I do struggle, but I think what I found is for the audience that I interact with, it's best when I'm authentic and myself. I do a lot about spiritual intimacy with God. So often I've gone into it thinking, well, they already know. They know how to find God. They know how to be still. They know how to be quiet. Only to understand that there's a lot of people that don't know. We know the word, but we don't actually know how to do it. So I find that just sharing from my own personal experiences on an everyday basis, but from my heart, and I'm actually speaking to that person's pain point. And so I share on social media, but then I also have invite people to come away. So then they get that sort of intimate one-on-one with myself, interacting with God. So it's a bit of both. I think I'm more comfortable when they're with me than when I'm sharing on social media. But on social media, it ceases, or any of the platforms that I'm on, it ceases to become intense when I just share from my heart, because that is what people who want to pursue intimacy with God, they want that vulnerability. So that's what works for me.
How would you say that, in terms of different generations, I think require different types of communication or require different things? And I just wondered, what have we picked up in terms of the way that, different generations engage and what lands with different generations? Have you got any insights for maybe, say, the younger generation, Emma, that you're working with? What particularly stands out for you when we think about this?
Yeah, I think actually similarly to what Jemma said, the younger generation now, so like generation X and Y, whatever they are, I don't really know. Is it X and Y, the youngest one now?
No,
Z.
Z.
I think, yeah, or even Alpha.
Z. That's my generation, isn't it?
Z, because I was
like
looking this up. Z is, I think, is it 96 or something to 2012 or something like that. So it's that's Z.
Okay, so the teens now are Z, right? We're talking about Z. So, because I always think of kind of the youngest generation as my generation, but it's not anymore. I'm 29. I'm definitely not in the youngest category anymore. But what I've discovered about the generation after, so those who are teens now, is that they are truth seekers. They want authenticity, and they've grown up with on the online world. They've grown up with social media. They've grown up with personalized ads. They can tell an advert from a mile off. They don't want something fake coming to them. They can just spot it. They want someone to be real. They want people to be accessible. They want to really see the reality of somebody's life, which is why reality TV is so huge. That's why vlogging is so popular. Even TikTok now I think people are surprised by TikTok becoming such a big social media platform, because it feels like not as good quality video, if that makes sense. It's very like homemade kind of video style, where you would think that we're progressing into more really well produced videos, but actually people just want reality. They want to know what's really going on. They want to see truth. So yeah, I would say as authentic as you can be with the teen generation now is the best. And yeah, I think that they really appreciate that and engage with that more than something that's really polished or really well put together.
I think authenticity is a really important word, and I think that would be the case for across generations. But I wonder whether there are particular features for other generations as well. Paul, Jemma, would you add in anything to what Emma's just said? Would there be different features that you would be aware of when you're trying to communicate, say maybe with millennials, Gen X and above?
I think I'll go there. Yeah, that's quite a good question. I remember when I did my first youth retreat, and when I do my retreats, they tend to be sort of like my age and even older, and I'm 52. And I did this youth retreat, and literally it was like communicating with a completely different generation. Yes, there was the concept of why they were coming away, but how I communicated with them. And I found one of the most powerful tools was I went to the Bible and I pulled out a lot of information on, you know, people that had been used by God, called by God, but they were all young people. So I came with them from that aspect to let them know that actually they're important. Within the church, I find that a lot of young people are told to sit down until they get older. And I came from the aspect of actually it was the young people that led us. So I had to interact with them on that way. So the first thing was for them to actually understand, you know what? I am important. I'm not supposed to be seen and not heard. I'm supposed to be heard. I am unique. So I had to change the conversation, pull that out of them to let them know that they mattered, they were significant, and then address how they then interacted with God. They had the same hunger, they had the same desires, but how I got their attention was first and foremost letting them know that you are seen, you are important, and you're significant.
Jemma, thanks. Paul, yeah.
Yeah, I agree fully and have little to add, but I would just say that, I'm seeing people online of obviously all generations. You know, it used to be that we sort of aimed young online necessarily, but you know, my mum's on more social media networks than I am, and I'm trying to keep up with her. But she's also brings with that maybe and some of her friends a certain presumption of like, well, this is how I communicate, and it's, you know, she'll send emails and tweets and things in fairly blunt, you know, well, if you can't keep up with the lingo, granddad, I'm going, what are you talking to? I'm your son, you know. So she's trying to sort of engage with that on those levels. But in all of those things, I've been sort of creating a small community with one of the projects I'm doing, which is mainly an older demographic, probably sort of 60, 65 plus. And they all just want community. We all just want to be part of something. And often that is about that interactivity and that sense of feedback and the sense of asking people questions. They reply and I reply back again. It's not just a lecture. It's actually gathering together and making people feel like they're part of something.
So interesting. And, you know, I'm just thinking about how we have multiple channels to communicate good news. You know, the church is called to be where the people are, to be salt and light. And, you know, just thinking today, you know, we have so many different ways that we can connect with a generation, multiple generations in different ways. And, you know, I'm just wondering, what would you say to someone, maybe, especially in the last couple of years, there'll be people who maybe have just been captured with a fresh sense of vision for something. You know, they've been maybe a new vision that's been birthing, that God's been stirring in them. They've been responding to that. They want to, you know, respond to that and step out. But, you know, there's all sorts of different ways that they could do that because there are multiple channels. How would you, how would you encourage them in that, you know, practical steps, thinking about what do they do? What do they do? Where do they go? Where do they start? If they're aiming at younger generations, they automatically go to TikTok, for example. If, you know, what would you say to someone who's just wanting to just show up and be present and be salt and light?
I think that talking about social media, I think it's just as important to study each individual platform as it is to study your audience. So knowing what content works for each platform. So if somebody is going to be watching a YouTube video, they're probably going to sit down and eat their dinner and watch the video. Whereas if someone's on Instagram, they might be on the bus looking for their stop, not really paying that much attention, flicking through really fast. So if you're trying to get information to them, you need to get it to them really quickly, really concisely, if it's on a platform like that. Whereas if it's YouTube, you've got an opportunity to, I guess, show more of yourself, explain a bit more, go in more depth, and people love that. And there's loads of different channels. Obviously, there's blogs, there's I don't know, everything, TikTok, all the different ones that there are. But I just think it's important to know how people use the channels that you're using to communicate, as well as who your audience are. Because I think so much we focus on who our audience are, and we think, right, I'm speaking to 30 to 40-year-olds and this is what they're going through in a day, but you don't really consider how that's going to translate based on what platform you use to communicate your message. So yeah, that would be my first bit of advice, I would say, to just know what channels work for what kinds of content.
Yeah, really helpful. Gemma, yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with what Emma said. And also don't allow yourself to become overwhelmed with the fact that there are so many platforms. So therefore, I have to be on all of those platforms. The audience that who you are interacting with might predominantly be on one platform. So why stretch yourself to be on Instagram, to be on TikTok, when actually they're on Facebook? Or there might be somebody who you just need their actual email address and you can interact with them privately. So I think that's the first thing, because you can get overwhelmed with so much. There's always something new coming out. And know who you are. If you have a call in and you have a message, you have to know who you are. I would spend time getting to know who you are, be confident, be grounded, because once you start, there is a cost. It costs something. And so many times we go into things and we don't realize the cost. And I don't mean monetary cost, I mean time, being consistent. Because when you start on social media, you hear all the time, be consistent, be consistent, be consistent. So in my own journey, the story is strong, but sometimes I've struggled being consistent. So I have to be consistent. And sometimes I've struggled being consistent because there's so many different platforms. Who am I speaking to? Where am I speaking to? So yeah, on the back of what Emma said, that's what I would say. Don't be overwhelmed with thinking you have to be on every platform, and get grounded in what your message is and what it is that you're trying to convey. Otherwise, you could end up becoming really discouraged and even hitting burnout.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. And I still work out the rhyme and reason to how I send out a tweet and it, I don't want to say blows up, but it goes fairly well. And then it put the same on Facebook and it gets nothing. And vice versa. Suddenly a thing goes well on Facebook, but not on Instagram or whatever it might be. So all sorts of quirks to those different forums. And one factor, of course, is a lot of these social media companies, they want you to stay on there. So you put that link in the original post. Facebook don't promote it quite as much. They don't want you going off Facebook. So things like that. So all those little quirks, that they all have the little nuances, certainly. And I found, for one project I've been doing on Facebook, I had a Facebook page, and then I realized that what it was lacking was that sense of community. So I made it a Facebook group and suddenly got a lot more engagement because people feel part of that thing again.
You know, we live in a world that's just saturated with information, content, noise, and yet you guys are connecting in, you know, just really effectively with your own audiences. And just love to know, what are you doing that's working so well, that's landing so well? How are you connecting so well with your audiences? Paul, can I come back? Oh yeah, Emma, yeah.
You go first.
Oh, okay, go on then, Paul. Go on.
Oh no, I thought I could buy myself some thinking time, but no. It only works for so many questions, that, doesn't it? I would say little things like what works best for me, I suppose, is being personal and being myself, and, you know, putting a bit of me there. I've got things that I don't. I mean, for example, you know, I've got two kids, but generally speaking, I keep that to my private Facebook thing, that, you know, and just not do pictures and things elsewhere. That's just my sort of rule on it. But I know others who have this whole like, hey, welcome to my family home kind of attitude to it all. But I do have a certain sense of my own personal thing out there, and making sure that I'm being authentic, being me, being honest, being genuine, being accurate as well. Weird stuff like that I find, you know, the number of, you know, you look at a friend's thing who there's spelling mistakes or errors, and people think, well, if I can't trust you on that, how am I going to trust you on the rest of it? So little elements like that, I think. And but yeah, just being vulnerable as well. Sometimes just being myself and having the joke on me, saying I get things wrong. Here we are, you know, we're all doing our best, and just sending out good. People want a sense of goodness and wholeness, and the Christianity has that, you know, through its very core. And you know, people often are looking for an escape from the bad news, and we literally have the good news, and that's a nice thing to remember, I think.
Paul, just staying with you a little bit longer, and love to come to Emma after that, but just thinking, you know, you've you know, scripted and written for Miranda, and you write for Top Gear and others. You know, these are, you know, big programs that are connecting with, you know, millions of people. And just wondering, what is it about that's capturing something in society, that captures something in culture?
Well, I don't know. The shows, if I knew, I'd be a rich man, I'm sure, and instead of a writer. But there you are. So, but I think in certainly the projects I've worked on, generally speaking, they are if not family friendly, then they are family friendlier than some. And a producer I worked with years ago once said to me, "If you're pitching an idea, if you can broadcast for your gran, if you can find a project, find a show, a program that people can watch across, 3 generations, then you're onto a winner." And things like Miranda, I've always approached it, the bits that I've been writing for it, just trying to write broad like that, really, and just write, something that is funny and, kind of, dare I say, wholesome and things like that. But not that everything I've ever written has been that, but just trying to add a bit of goodness. And, when I started out I've never been holier than thou. When I started out as a stand-up, I was doing some jokes which were having a go at certain, I don't know, celebrities or whatever, just in a negative way. And I had a decisive moment a few years ago when I thought, I've always been a Christian, throughout my career. And I thought, I don't think that every joke I'm putting out there is what God would want me to. And I've since then tried to just make sure that we are having a laugh, but together and not at people. And I think that since right now we need joy in the world, certainly. And that's always what I've tried to put out there with the more recent things I've written, certainly.
Emma, how about you? What is it that you do with Girl Got Faith that really lands with your audience?
So I think for us, our vision and our purpose for existing is to serve teen girls. That's our purpose. We want teenage girls to be confident in their faith. So if our purpose is to serve them, then we need to do that through the way that we're speaking to them. Whereas I see so many organizations that are kind of always posting something for somebody to have to do. So click this, buy this, go here, watch this. Like there's so many asks on social media. So we try and not really ask much of our audience, but instead just serve them. And we serve them with truth. So we do that consistently. Every single morning at 7:30, we will post an encouraging quote or a scripture from the Bible, because we know that teen girls are either getting ready for school or they're on their way to school. And before they step into those school gates, we want to know that they've read something that is edifying, encouraging them in their faith and making them feel more confident about who they are in God, so that they can walk into those school gates and maybe be a bit more confident that day to share their faith or to just be who God's called them to be. So I think for us it's all about keeping our purpose in mind and not getting too sidetracked with targets and goals and, but we want to reach this many people and we want to do this and we want to hit these targets on ticket sales or whatever it is. But actually just remembering we've got an audience that we want to serve, and that is why we exist. So that's what we're going to do.
Jemma, same question to you. What is it that you do that's really landing with the people you're connecting with and engaging with?
This one's taken me a while to figure out, because I think that, we're always trying to do the right thing. I speak a lot and I teach about intimacy with God, and what works for me is actually being intimate, exposing my journey and sharing my journey of the challenges, the ups and the downs of being intimate with God, because a lot of people come with this preconceived idea that, I just have to be still and I'm going to find God. And if I don't find him, there's an issue and blah, blah, blah. And so for me, it's actually sharing it on a day-to-day basis, sharing the highs, sharing the lows, really being vulnerable, because when you're intimate with somebody, they get to see you in all of your bareness. And so I've learned that when I bear my bareness within the boundaries, that connects with people the most, because that's where they're at. When all the highs and everything's gone and you've been out there and you smiled and you've done this and you've done that and you come home and you're thinking, but Lord, I just want to connect with you and I don't know how. Well, it's all good and work and me posting, yes, come away for the day and be still. That doesn't, that's what I want, but how do I do? But when I break down how I do it, when I break down that there's some days I go there and it seems like God is silent, but this is what I do, this is how I get through it, that I find gets the most engagement. And funny enough, that's the bit that I think people don't want to know. So I'm realizing that that's what God has called me to do, to expose the intimate side of actually being intimate with him. And that means exposing the highs and the lows.
Thinking about the last couple of years and the way that we've all in different ways faced challenges, in the way that we've had to pivot and change and adapt, and then thinking about this coming year, how has the landscape changed for you guys in your own spheres and your own the sectors, the context that you're working in, and what does this year look like in terms of how you're going to adapt and change as you go forward? Paul, can we come to you?
Yeah, it's been certainly adapting has been. I've never thought I'd have to adapt as much, really. I used to be 3 stand-up shows a week, and then that became 3 stand-up shows in a year, and that was my bread and butter. That was my job, really. And the writing was something I was doing just a bit ad hoc, and the broadcasting again very much even ad hocer, if that's a word. It's not a word, but so I'm teaching now. I'm lecturing at the University of Winchester in screenwriting. Been literally marking 30 scripts today, but also trying to. My dream is to write more books. I've done 8 or 10 books thus far, but I'd like to write more fiction and just put out some nice, good, funny, fun stories, really. So that's the plan there. Because I've got gigs coming up, I've got live shows, but I can no longer rely on those. And if anything I've learned in the last couple of years, it's those things that you think you can rely on. You can't fully, but we never could, really. It was always a bit of an illusion that we think, oh yeah, well that's that job that's been my bread and butter for so many years. Actually, different meals are available other than bread and butter, I suppose. But it does mean, as I said, where at the start I used to wear 2 or 3 hats, now I wear like 9 hats. But that's okay, because like this, it's all about communication. And these laptops that we've had in our rooms for all this time, it turns out, are much bigger windows than we ever thought they were going to be. And the fact that as for many of us, church moved onto YouTube, or our local church here has an older demographic, and so they were recording and doing them via the telephone. I haven't said the word telephone for years. What am I even saying? But it feels like a candlestick telephone. That's sort of very old-fashioned. But people were listening to church and attending that way, and they felt they're part of it. They felt they're attending. So I just think, and I was chatting to someone the other day who was planning an event and was after some tips. And I said, I think my only tip I could say is just be adaptive, be ready to change anything. And if you have to move online, you've got to move online. If you have to do it in person but distanced, fine. But I wouldn't plan for anything that is, well, this, I'm going to spend thousands and thousands of pounds on this event, can only work if there's 4,000 people crammed in a small room. I would be a little bit more flexible than that looking forward, I think. But that's okay, because that can be exciting as well.
Jemma, coming over to you.
Yeah. Wow. I think, over the last few years, what I did is I actually found myself, like Paul, I was wearing all of my 9 hats at once, and I was being active and not proactive. And so in finding myself, learned and adapted of how to wear those 9 hats individually, when to put one on and take the other one off. So, I'm actually excited about this year, because I get the opportunity to wear those different hats at different times. I'm going to be reopening my cake business, relaunching that. I've taken some time out this month. Actually, this is the only engagement that I'm doing, because just gone back to basics, to just sit and be with God. What are we doing with God's romantic getaway? What the direction that we're taking it in? And so ensuring that when I put those hats on, I'm wearing them correctly, and I haven't got the business hat on, but trying to do ministry and vice versa. So during the pandemic, what seemed like a really crazy and intense time, and everybody talking about finding themselves, and I thought that I had found myself during the pandemic, but actually it was the span of it. It was the first year, and then last year, and now coming into this year, I finally feel like actually I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know how to approach it. And that means that the people who I'm interacting with will get the best of me. And one of the most profound lessons was at the beginning of the year. I have a Facebook group, Paul. I did this Facebook group thinking, yes, it was going to be easy. It was the hardest thing ever. I felt like I was carrying dead weight. And at the beginning of the year, I made a decision to walk away from it. And I said, whoever wants to come, you can come, we can liaise via WhatsApp, and that's it. And a handful of people came, and ministering to that handful of people has been the best thing, because I feel that my words are going out, and these people, they want to be there, and I'm not carrying people who don't want to be there. So it's things like that in whatever it is that I'm doing. Lord, where am I going? Who am I interacting with? So finding myself and being proactive and not just active, that's the thing for me.
Emma, coming to you, the last couple of years, what does it look like for you and in terms of the way that you've had to adapt?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I've noticed with social media over the last few years is that it's become much more of a news platform. So people use social media for information and news more now than they ever did before. And it was when we were getting the kind of, you wanted the breakdown of whatever the 5 p.m. briefing was, or whatever it is, or people just sharing the information because everybody needed news, everybody needed information, everybody wanted to know what was going on. So there was a transition I felt on social media that went from being an entertainment and kind of like a escapism kind of platform to being something that was actually quite a heavy place to be, although very necessary, actually really heavy. And for our audience of teen girls, I think that's why we've seen such a shift onto platforms like TikTok, because you're not really seeing news updates on there. It's straight up entertainment, comedy, fun, like really everything that's not serious is on TikTok. So I think for us, just understanding the shift in that landscape and knowing that actually people on social media now are ready to engage with, I guess, more information-based things, or we could take some of our blog posts that we used to post on our website and we can now make them into carousel posts that are, people are happy to scroll through and read them. Whereas before, people would have just wanted to see something fun and light on social media, but we can share it in a bit more depth now on Instagram, but then knowing that there's another platform where people are seeking entertainment, people are still seeking escapism and still wanting to serve our audience kind of in that way.
Just thinking about the just this trajectory, the last couple of years we've had to pivot. How will your the context in which you're ministering and living and working and seeking to join in with and partner with God's work in your context, how's that going to change, do you see, in the next 5-10 years? Just thinking about the young people of over the next 5-10 years, Paul, in broadcasting, writing, hospitality for you, Jemma, and what you do. Would you say is the landscape going to change, and how will you need to change the way that you communicate and connect, as far as you can tell? I mean, it's kind of a big question, isn't it? But
yeah, I have no idea, and that's fine. It's okay to not have a clue on that one. I think in many ways, I think there are things that will always stay the same. We write things, we speak about things, we deliver things, we talk about things, we preach, we teach, we share, we gather, and even if we have to gather online. So I think we can plan for those things. I think what we don't know yet is in 5 years from now via what medium we'll be delivering it. So I've found, I mean, not like many, I suppose, like Zoom, like this has been effective in the last couple of years. I've had churches, for example, say, can we book you for an online gig? And we talk about Zoom versus YouTube Live versus Facebook Live. And Zoom's nice because you can see people or not, you can switch cameras off, whatever, but you can interact. And there's a sense of that. There are sort of routines I've got now which only work on Zoom, which don't work live in person, which is odd. But I don't know in 5 years from now what platform we'll be using. I can tell you, I don't like Microsoft Teams. I've been teaching on that. It's been awful. I can't get my head around it. But then my students are looking at me like, come on, Grandad, get with you just need another year of Microsoft Teams and you'll know what you're doing. But who knows in 5 years from now what we'll be using to do that. But that's just the conduit. That's just they're just different stages. But the message that we'll be telling, we can plan that now. We can be writing now. We can be planning now the initiatives, the speeches, the books, whatever it might be, even if we don't quite know whether we'll have to copy and paste to a kind of a new way of doing it in 5 years or even 10 years from now.
Emma, coming around to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Paul. I hate Microsoft Teams. But also I completely agree that it is so unpredictable. I think more than ever, the next 5 to 10 years feel more unpredictable than they've ever felt, not only because of the pandemic and how we've known that things can just change in an instant, but also just with the way technology is moving so fast and there's new platforms all the time, there's new ways of communicating all the time. So I think it kind of provides an exciting challenge almost, and one that's really necessary to just kind of be in the season that you're in. Don't think too much about what's to come in 5-10 years, but actually actually know that there's grace for this season. So whatever your message is now, share that diligently, and don't treat the next season as though it's the same as this one, and don't treat this one as though it's the same as the last, because we're always shifting, we're always changing, and it's important to share messages that are relevant with what God is doing in the generation that we're speaking to. And we don't want to just kind of plow on with this message because we think it's good. Actually, I want to be in tune with what God is doing and what is going on in the world, and really be able to communicate something that is meaningful and relevant to the time that we're in. So yeah, I'm excited that we're all going to be kind of living in a bit more of a present way, hopefully.
Thanks, Emma. Gemma, how about you?
I agree with Paul. Actually, I'm so glad that you both said that you haven't got a clue, because I was thinking I haven't got a clue, and I don't want to be the first one to say that. But in the midst of that, I think that to an extent, although you don't have a clue and I don't have a clue, that I do sense that I'm going to have to leave my comfort zone. Leave my comfort zone, learn new things in order to keep up. Stay close to God. Don't panic, because the world is changing so much. And as you said, Emma, social media is changing so much. You can almost, oh my gosh, what? I'm not on Clubhouse. Oh, I need to do that. I need to do this. And that is going to definitely affect your mental health and well-being. And that's exactly what the enemy's ploy is. So it's like, don't panic, breathe, pause, hit the pause button, take your time, teach yourself new things, find out, again, don't overdo it in sort of like research, but do research and find what is best for you, because if things continue to move as fast as they are, you will have to know with confidence that the platform that you are using is the right platform for you. And well, just because Emma's on there and Emma's getting this amount, that's not the platform for me, so I need to stay on Facebook. So teach yourself, get ready to leave your comfort zone to learn something new. But for me, it's breathe, don't panic, stay as close to God as you can. That's always going to be the platform that I go back to like, okay, Father, there's all these choices I need to make. Where am I going and what am I doing?
Just noticing, Paul, we're losing your body a bit there with the lighting. I don't know.
I hadn't spotted, but the sun has been slowly setting. So yeah, I can change. We can work on that, because otherwise it gets a little bit like we're doing horror stories, doesn't it? So yeah.
There you go. Oh, brilliant!
Go. And that'll be
just thinking about the culture that we're working in, ministering in, reaching out into, seeking to connect with. It can be quite a sensitive place to creatively engage with the good news and be salt and light, and to show up as salt and light as Christians. And there's lots of talk about this cancel culture, and maybe there's fear about being cancelled. Maybe I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to offend anyone. What are you guys learning about showing up in a place like that, and how can we be present confidently and courageously as salt and light?
No one wants to talk about cancel culture. I think that's the main thing we know about cancel culture, is no one wants to talk about. But it is. It's a challenging one, because it is an area where there's so much heat around it, I think. But actually, a lot of that heat does fizzle, and the trouble you get is, it's not for us to say, oh well, the trouble is people can have a knee-jerk reaction to things, and therefore they're wrong to do that, because people are going to have the reaction they're going to have, and that is something we don't have control over. So there's no point in many ways. If it's something you can't control, then it'd be a waste of energy to try and do that. So I guess all we can do is we can pray about how we should be speaking and what we should be speaking about. And if we think we've got an issue we need to be talking about, then we pray about that, and we find the most respectful, I think, way of doing that. But I think it is one of those things that if you sort of feel like you're going near that area where this is something I could be cancelled over, then especially, pray hard about it and speak to people about it, maybe before suddenly. And also it's so easy to send out a tweet and even a YouTube video, suddenly before you know it, you think, oh yeah, I'm just going to film my ranty opinion about this thing, put it out there, go to sleep on it, wake up the next morning and find, oh dear, several thousand. Well, I can tell you the true thing. Years ago, did some work for a group of people and for a company. And this is like 15 years ago now, I wrote a blog about my experience for this company, thinking that blogs were like diary entries, that no one had ever engaged with any of my blog posts. And I thought, this is a journal for me, an online journal that no one is reading, but it's for me. And then 6 weeks went by and suddenly the phone rang, and it was catch up with this bloke who booked me. And he just dropped in a little quote from my blog. And I thought, oh no, he's seen it. Someone, even just the idea that someone had seen this blog post. And of course, now I'm much, much more aware to not bite the hand that feeds me. And that, anything you put online, even anything you put in a WhatsApp message. I mean, that's the thing, I always thought of WhatsApp as a private messaging thing, but actually it's owned by Facebook and people can screenshot stuff. Don't put anything down unless you are happy with it being out there, I think is a safe thing. But, if you're delivering a message, pray about it. There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
Anything else to add from you guys?
I think, Paul summed it up beautifully. For me, faith over fear and implement wisdom. That's the only way, literally. And the reason why I say faith over fear, because there could be something that you need to say, but you're fearful of saying it because, of the backlash of it. But that might be the thing God wants you to say, God wants you to share, God wants you to explore. And so you have to implement faith, as in pray first, literally pray. Don't just say I'm stepping out on faith and you haven't got a clue what you're doing. But faith over fear, and implement that godly wisdom, seek counsel. That's my words. And
you pick up on a great thing that I'd love to just pick up with you for the next few minutes, just thinking about fear. Fear is something that the enemy would love to throw at us, and just thinking about how God is stirring, stirred people to communicate good news in their own ways, in their own different contexts, in their own different channels. But often fear may prevent us from doing that. And, fear is certainly in my own story, as a teenager, is a big thing to grapple with, even as, as an adult too. It's there, isn't it? I think we all have experienced fear in different ways. And Emma, just in your work, what have you noticed? How would you encourage your audience if they're grappling with fear? They may have a message, but they want to get it out, but maybe fear holds them back a bit.
Yeah, I think doing anything publicly, even if it's to one person or two people, there's a sense of vulnerability there, because you're showing part of your heart, you're showing part of your mind. And I think, again, that's kind of related to the cancel culture thing, in that people are scared to kind of say what they think about something because they're afraid that somebody's not going to fully understand them. But then actually, I guess, always trying to find the positive spin on anything that scares you. So if it is something like, oh, I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing and people are going to misunderstand me, actually understanding, well, it's because your words have power. It's because your words have weight. And we've seen throughout history that when people say things, it impacts society, it impacts people. So if you've got a message and you believe that that message is a good one, then you're going to have a good impact, that you're going to be able to do good things, that you're going to have influence. So I think it's about kind of looking for those opportunities to see the positive side of anything that you're fearful of. And it doesn't mean that that makes your fears go away. I think fear will always be a lingering thing for me, especially like imposter syndrome, thinking, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be here. Somebody else should be doing this. Somebody else would be way better at this than me. But actually just having the authenticity, knowing that you're not perfect. You're not going to get everything right 100% of the time. And we can show grace to others, and hopefully grace will be shown to us. But we can be a part of impacting the culture and being people that show grace, being people that speak in love, and being okay with being completely imperfect. And I think that really helps me overcome a lot of fears about kind of speaking publicly or sharing a message, is just knowing I don't have to get it 100% right, and that is absolutely okay.
I think if I could just add as well, I think the fact that we need to be careful of, aware of knee-jerk reactions, and also as Christians not necessarily make knee-jerk reactions ourselves. And I've been to churches in the past where, they'll say, did you see that TV show on BBC last night? Shocking. Therefore, here I've photocopied lots of complaint forms. I shall hand them around. We'll all fill them in. And we are, as Emma was just saying, we meant, if we can approach things with grace and respect, then it can make all the difference. We can be part of that conversation and be a voice for good and all these sorts of things. Because in the last year, I've become a trustee for Christians in media, and hearing some stories of Christians who work in the media as broadcasters, as producers, behind the camera, as journalists. It can be a lonesome business, and the church and the media historically have not always been the best of friends, but I think both have a very similar role to play. It's the salt light thing. It's wanting to speak truth. It's wanting to make a difference in the world and society. But both have in the past, sometimes attacked each other, and which is a shame, because actually we need to be realizing that if we can all be the best we can, setting up the best messages we can, not having knee-jerk reactions, not trying to create enemies where there aren't any around us, but actually being part of a good, fruitful conversation and dealing with respect and grace. Absolutely.
Thanks, Paul. Jemma, any comments on this?
Fear. Oh my gosh, I've spent most of my life living in fear. Fear can be crippling. It can kill you. It can kill your vision. It can kill your dreams. It can just destroy you. And that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway, is so true. But I found in my own journey, you can only do it with God. Literally, you can only feel the fear and do it anyway with God. And if you don't do it with him, you run the risk of actually feeling the fear, doing it, but doing it out of his will, and therefore doing more damage. So when I feel fearful about something, I know without a doubt that is something I can do. I might not feel like it, but I know it's something I can do, which is why that fear is being presented there. And I then take the steps to work through how I'm going to get from that place of being fearful to being strong enough to do it. And also recognizing the difference between the good fear that's like, no, the Holy Spirit saying to you, no, that's an uneasiness, not for you to do it. And the fear of when the enemy is actually just holding you back. Learning the difference between those two has been crucial for me. And I think it's important as children of God that we do know the difference between those two, when it's the Holy Spirit saying halt and when it's the enemy telling you, you can't do this.
So final comments as we come into land, just thinking about 2022, communication in 2022. What would you say to someone who feels like God may be nudging them into this to maybe step out and be a bit more courageous? What parting words would you give to people as they think about 2022 and communicating and being salt and light in this year?
I think I would say that there's a temptation to feel like it's an overcrowded space, that everybody's doing something, everybody's starting something, everyone's got their own website or their own platform, but there is room for you. There is always space. If you've got a message that you believe is from God, you've got a vision on your heart, this is just a generational way that we share messages now. And it doesn't mean that the space is too crowded for you. There is always space. So yeah, just go for it. Be confident, know your why, and be consistent.
I would add to what Emma has said, definitely. And that is, you were created for a reason and you can make an impact. And don't look at the fact of the crowds. You can make an impact. Somebody could talk to 1,000 people and those people are like, yeah. And then they walk away and they remember it. And a week later, whatever that person has said has gone. But you could make an impact on one person and save their life. And when I mean save their life, I mean literally stop them from actually taking their life. You can impact them that way. So whether it's 10,000 people or one person, you can make an impact. And that impact that you make on someone's life, it can be life-changing. So step out of your comfort zone, find your voice and use it.
It's brilliant.
I totally echo those thoughts, and what Emma was saying about why are you doing this? One of the things I often think of when writing a project is why this project, why now, and why are you the one to deliver it? And we are all beating hearts and unique individuals. We're handcrafted by God for a purpose, and it is easier now than ever before. We are all broadcasters now, whether we want to. My local vicar really didn't want to become a broadcaster when he suddenly had to go on YouTube Live every week, but he did it. And individuals amongst us, we might actually find that yes, we want to start that podcast, which you can just do if you would like to. Start that YouTube video. Try a thing. I tried a thing last year, didn't really work, stopped it, tried something else, it did work. So you can do that. And the opportunities are there if you have the right idea, and pray about it. Find out what that idea might be, and Godspeed.
It's so brilliant. It's been so wonderful to spend some time with you guys over the last 40 minutes or so. Thank you for giving up your time in a busy day, and God bless you and all you're doing in your different work. We're cheering you on. Thank you for all that you bring to the national landscape and to all that God is doing. It's inspiring just to spend some time with you and seeing how you're partnering with him in this time. So God bless you. Thank you for spending some time today, and hope you have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.